the majority of the world's Jews were in Poland. Naturally, the emigration to the U.S. had also been significant in the previous decades. So the population of American Jews was catching up with the population of Polish Jews. But nevertheless, these were the two centers of world Jewry, you could say. So in 1936, he decides to go to Poland, Eastern Europe in general. He's trying to encourage as many Jews to, according to the main tenets of Zionism, to move back to the Holy Land. He entered into contacts with the various governments. On September 9th, 1936, he meets with the Polish government. They started discussing plans of relocation of large numbers of Jews to Israel. However, the British felt that this would interfere with a very delicate demographic and political balance that was in the Holy Land, and they tried to torpedo it as much as possible. Nevertheless, there was an increased emigration from Poland to the Holy Land after that visit. But what is most important is that the Poles and Zew Jabotyński, they agreed on close military and intelligence cooperation. Jabotyński was an instrumental person in the creation of two groups, the Irgun and Hagana, so paramilitary groups that were fighting against the local Arabs in the Holy Land, but also against the British Mandate, so the British Empire. This was a bit difficult for the Poles. At the time, sure, the Poles didn't have great relations with the British. Their closest allies were still the French, the Romanians. But nevertheless, Britain was an important state in Europe, and to support these groups out in the open would naturally mean trouble. So all of this was kept very secret. Nevertheless, the Polish military intelligence started training many of these paramilitary members. Some of them arrived to Poland. Some of the Poles went to the Holy Land. They handed over weapons. They taught them basic military tactics, especially for guerrilla warfare and similarly. So these were important contacts in the lead up to the Second World War. Then during the war, naturally, a lot happened. One of the things is that hundreds of thousands of Poles were deported by the Soviet Union into the depths of Siberia after the Soviet Union and the Red Army invaded Poland on September 17th. However, in 1941, with Operation Barbarossa, the German attack against the Soviet Union, the political situation shifted 180 degrees, and the Soviet Union had to create an alliance with the British and later on with the Americans as well. But initially it was with the British, and the Brits who were allied with the Polish government in exile in London. They needed a rapprochement between the Poles and the Soviets. So under their leadership, the British leadership, the Sikorski-Majski agreement was signed between the leader of the Polish government in exile and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union. This agreement meant that the Poles were allowed to create an army on Soviet territory that was supposed to fight along with the Red Army or within the Red Army against the Germans, but they neglected the weapons that they needed, the uniforms. But out of these hundreds of thousands of Poles that had been deported to the Soviet Union, naturally the officers had been executed in the Katyn massacre. But among the civilians and lower ranking privates from the army that had been taken prisoners of war, out of that mass, an army was created numbering around 60 to 70,000 people. They, after a while, with another British intervention, since they were suffering so much in the Soviet Union, they were not receiving weapons, they were not receiving food, they were basically on the brink of starvation. They were allowed, and also Stalin realized that some of these Poles, they are an element that we cannot really control. They are still infused by Polish nationalism. Maybe it would be better to get rid of this headache. And previously they had gotten rid of one headache by shooting them in the back of their heads, but in this case they realized that letting them leave to British-controlled territories would be easier. So going through Uzbekistan, part of the Soviet Union at the time, Kazakhstan, same thing there. Finally, they were able to reach Iran. Iran, which at that point was divided between the Soviet Union and the British, but they were able to cross into the British-controlled territory. From there, through Iraq, another British mandate, Jordan, same thing there, and finally to the Holy Land. From the Holy Land, some of them left directly, others went to Egypt. They sailed back to Europe and participated in the invasion of the Italian peninsula as part of General Anders' army. However, there was the issue about the Jews, the Polish Jews. General Anders, the Polish government in exile, claimed that everybody who was a Polish citizen in 1939 at the time of the Soviet invasion was a Polish citizen and should be able to join the army and leave with General Anders. The Russians didn't agree. They argued that all the Ukrainians and all the Jews that had been Polish citizens up until 1939 were in reality Soviet subjects and were not allowed to leave.
Adam, I'm sorry, the clock in the corner of the studio is telling me that the time for this programme is over, so if we could pause it there, we'll pick it up next time. There we are, as usual, time has defeated us, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we will continue the story here on Poland Daily History.